After the beach, we're moving on to the headland where the lighthouse is. And for this, I'm going to use a greyish colour. So I'm going to use blue, ultramarine, and some burnt umber. Mix the two together. So it's a grey. Just dilute it a little bit so it's not so dark. And drop that onto the headland like that. Then with a darker mix, so the same two colours but just more pigment. Then we move on to the cliff face and the rock out into the water. Might as well start with the rock first. So a light colour first. This is some raw sienna. Paint that over the sunlit part of the rock. Then with ultramarine and burnt umber, put the dark colour over the top of the light. Smaller rock here. Then, with a plastic card, just scrape over the surface, like that. That was easy, wasn't it? Put that to one side, and then we move on to the main rock face. So, with a large detail brush, not too wet. So get some tissue and remove some of the water from the brush. And then we start with the light colour first. Paint that in. Get a little bit more water. Then burnt umber and ultramarine. Paint over the first colour. Carefully paint that in. And right out of the painting, some burnt umber. Now, you have to do this fairly quickly because what you don't want is for the paint to dry. Then with a card. Hold the card firmly between your fingers and your thumb and about 45 degrees and scrape the surface of the paper so the paint is left in the dip of the textured paper. And it comes down to the water's edge. Then we just let it dry. Now, after the rocks, we then move on to or back to the beach where we've got the pebbles. And I've got some masking fluid covering up some of the larger stones. But before I remove the masking fluid, I'm going to put some shade by the side of the stones. So with a dark colour, ultramarine and burnt umber, and you just drop the colour onto the side of the masking fluid, so you get this small shadow on each stone. And just on the surf line, a slightly darker line, the shade from that water. And then we let that dry off. Remove the masking fluid by rubbing with your fingers. So we have those small stones with just a little shadow underneath. And with some raw sienna, small detail brush, and just put a bit of colour on there. There we are. 3D rocks. We're going to leave the painting so it dries before we move on to the next stage. And now for the fun bit, removing the masking fluid. So with clean, dry hands, a dry painting, and we remove the masking fluid by rubbing with your finger. There's the lighthouse, the cottage, some waves. Now for the big wave, so rub off the masking fluid, the surf, right the way down to the water's edge. When the masking fluid is completely gone, we then put the detail into the wave. I'm going to use the Van Gogh, some cobalt blue with just a touch of green. And try the colour out first, a little bit darker. Right, so with the Van Gogh, we'll have the wave cresting and tilting down into the trough. So start at the top and just bring that over like that. So there's the water cascading down. Like that. And with the same colour, just put some of that colour into the rolling wave as well. Then we move on to the foliage brush. So squeeze the water out of the brush, tap the brush onto the palette to open it up, pick up the bluey green colour and just stipple some texture into the wave. Some cobalt blue. Again, just test the colour on a piece of paper. That's it. So this is the texture and the shade as the wave rolls over. Just stipple that. Just a small amount of texture on that wave coming in there. Now, with a small detail brush and some blue, again cobalt blue, just put a little bit of shade on that surf line. So I think the water is just about complete. There's one or two little bits I need to finish off. Like this headland here, some of that colour would actually be reflected into the water. So I can see I've still got some of that burnt umber and ultramarine mix in my palette, so not to waste anything. We just put a few ripples in with that darker colour. For the reflections, not too much, bit there. Okay, sky's done, sea, sand, surf, now the lighthouse. With a small detail brush, we'll start I think with the cottage. Colour shadow, and just put some shade on the side of the little lighthouse keeper's cottage there. Touch of blue. Right, we need some colour on the lighthouse. So cobalt blue, a little bit of shadow. So the sunlight's coming through from the left, so the shadow is going to be on the right hand side of the lighthouse. So just paint that in. Right, so wash the brush out. So it's just got clean water. And then fade that water into that first colour. Like that. Just let that dry off. For the roof of the cottage, some burnt sienna. There. Going back to that burnt umber and ultramarine, a little bit more blue. Some windows. Right. Once we've painted the cottage and the shade on the lighthouse, we let that dry before we put in any detail on the lighthouse. So with the small detail brush and ultramarine and burnt umber, we just start to put in a bit of detail. And some blue, some cobalt blue. Just touch that into the light. Just put a couple of windows in. Very, very pale. Now you see I'm fiddling now, I should stop. So I'm just going to wash the brush out, have a quick look to see if I've got everything. I think I have. Although this is a painting of a lighthouse, but the real star of the show, of course, is the breaking wave coming in onto the beach. Lots of opportunity to use a credit card for scraping out on the rocks, and plenty of texture on the beach, and of course using that masking tape technique for the horizon. So this is a very simple painting, but very, very effective. I hope you give it a try.
Now available to buy. Try these techniques at home whenever you wish. The extended DVD of today's workshop and the book that accompanies this series are now available from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.